everybody, it's Marika from the future here with a spoiler warning for Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. So if you haven't seen the show and you want to, watch it and then come back and listen to our thoughts on it. So with that, let's get into the podcast. Hello everybody, welcome to the Acid Wash Anime Podcast. I'm your host Marika and this is my lovely co-host Sydney.
Hello.
Together, we make up the bisexual supporting cast, and today we're coming at you with another anime review, only this time it's for Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
It is a show which I watched for the first time, and Sydney watched for the first and a half.
The second and a half, because
She's seen it 1.5 times before.
Before this watch through, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It's always weird when I've only seen parts of shows to say, oh, I've seen that, or I've seen that this many times. That happened like with Lost. I watched like halfway through Lost and then didn't because I was borrowing the DVDs from my friend and then my friend moved. So did not have access to that anymore. But so it's like when people are like, oh, how many times have you seen Lost? I'm like, 3.5.
Yeah, I was the same way with Supernatural because I just had watched the first maybe 5 or 7 seasons, like more than I had watched the end ones, both because they were coming out and because, you know, I'd start them with people or they'd get abandoned or whatever, I'd put it on in the background. So
yeah. And then what's weirder is right now I'm rewatching Inuyasha but I say rewatching lightly because I never actually watched it. Like I saw, how do I say this? I consumed the story from beginning to end. I did not consume every episode of the anime.
Because you were watching it when it was on air.
No, not even. It was complete. I just wasn't really interested in the story.
What were you interested in?
I was interested in the relationship between Inuyasha and Kago. I really just I was in it for the romances. I just wanted to see how those ended up. And so I would read episode descriptions on Wikipedia. And then if I found the episode interesting, then I would go and I would find it online.
How old were you when you were doing this?
I was, oh gosh, I think I was in like 8th or 9th grade.
Okay.
Yeah, so 2.5 times for me watching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
So since you're someone who is watching it again, is there anything that like caught you off guard or surprised you during this like second, third-ish rewatch?
No, I wouldn't say that anything threw me off or caught me off guard. I did kind of misremember Envy's character arc. In my head, Envy actually had kind of a redemption arc, but they really didn't.
No, they really
at all.
Didn't.
And so that threw me off because I was waiting for that to happen. I was like, because in my head, Envy went through this whole like, oh, they're like working for father and everything. And then they kind of end up with, oh, what's her name? Princess May Chang. And then because I remembered their death scene and how they had a whole like kind of crisis of self and like kind of had to like face the fact that they actually did want to be more like humans or that they wanted what humans had and things. And in my head, I think I conflated Greed and Envy's character arcs and how, now that I'm talking about it, I feel like they kind of had like opposite endings where Envy died still kind of railing against humans and being like, no, of course, like this is who I am. I'm Envy, but I hate humans, da 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 da. And then Greed actually was like, yeah, I want what you guys have. I want what humans have. And in the end, he felt like he got everything he wanted. And so, yeah, that's kind of a cool mirror there, I guess, of like two emotionally significant endings for the homunculi. Probably like the only like truly most emotionally significant endings for them.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the only homunculi that we really
cared about.
Yeah. Like the only other ones, I mean, I was gonna say they're the main ones that we saw, but like Bradley, we saw him a lot, and
we saw not Sloth. Sloth was kind of there in the second half of it, but we saw
but
Gluttony
only for
a lot.
Like, yeah, I was gonna say Gluttony was the only other one, but he's like, I don't want to say he's a non-character because he definitely has a defined personality and is a noticeable presence, but he's just not multifaceted, and so it's hard to really like care about him in terms of his life or death being emotionally impactful. And I'm not saying that as like a critique. I don't like every character doesn't have to be someone who you're super emotionally connected to, and I think Gluttony served his purpose fine. But yeah, I guess the other homunculi, I don't know why, like, I don't know why, even without the redemption arc, I felt so much more connected to Envy and then Greed as homunculi than I did Bradley or, what was the son's name?
Salim. Pride.
Like, I was just like, I wouldn't give a shit if either one of them died. Like, Bradley died and I was like, hooray. Salim didn't die and I was like, why? And Envy, I mean, in the moment I was laughing because it was like a fucking ridiculous death scene. But overall, like, the impact of their death, I was like, man, I'm kind of like bummed to see that character go. Because even though they're the bad guy and they had to die, I was like, I liked seeing that character.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I don't have that same connection to Salim and Bradley.
I wonder if it's just the way that Salim and Bradley were set up as like the main villains, and so they were, I feel like they were kind of less, more towards Gluttony on the multifaceted spectrum, where like they didn't ever really stray from, they were never really challenged on their ideals. Like they, like, the main characters did challenge them. They were like, why are you doing this, da 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 da, you shouldn't do this.
Although,
this is bad.
I'm not gonna lie, so I know in the moment I said, and I still stand by this is gonna sound like I'm like contradicting myself, but I'm not, that like Envy, when they're having this whole like realization, like, no, I could possibly envy humans, I was like, that's really stupid. Your name's fucking Envy. Like, of course you envy them. But at the same time, like, it did feel a little bit abrupt because I don't really feel like at any point they showed ever being envious of humans. Like, they were just, they never see that, like, it's like, it felt like it almost came out of nowhere. Like,
whereas with Greed, like, we kind of got the hints that he actually craved like actual connection with people rather than just material goods. Like, when with like the first incarnation of Greed and his like posse of chimera people, like,
right, and him remembering them and being upset about them, and even
and
like
he like tried to pass it off as like, oh, they're just my minions, you can't hurt my minions, but then later he has like that realization, like, no, they were like his friends,
right. And even him like cohabitating with Ling, even like, though there wasn't, or I don't remember there necessarily anything being explicitly spoken until the very end about them wanting to be with each other or be in this type of, for lack of a better word, relationship. Just like the fact that they were both willing to work together to coexist inside the same body, I think says something towards his acceptance of humans as a being that are of at least close to equal stature as homunculi.
Yeah. And so I guess I had, because I remember, I think when we were talking in Signy's segment a few episodes ago, when we had reached the halfway point of the show, I think you were talking either like in the podcast or just us in our lives talking, you had mentioned something, you were like, ooh, like maybe Envy will get a redemption arc, and I was like sitting there being like, haha, yeah, it's gonna happen and she's gonna love it, and then it didn't happen, and I was like, wait a second. So I think I really must have conflated Envy and Greed's character arcs, right, in my head.
And it did very much feel like it was leading towards a redemption arc for Envy when they had to work together to get out of Gluttony.
Yeah,
like, it was a moment where they're like, all right, we gotta set aside our shit and like work together to get out of this, otherwise we're all gonna die. And so I feel like that kind of life-threatening situation that forces people to work together is a very common jumping off point for a redemption arc, and so that's why I kind of saw it coming.
Yeah,
but you know what, I'm almost glad that it didn't happen, because I don't think it would have been worse if it did. I don't think it would have necessarily been better if it did. I just, sometimes it's nice to have villains who are multifaceted and who you're able to empathize with at some points, who are still villains and don't get redeemed, because that's an interesting aspect to a story. I think Envy's character really could have gone either way and had the same level of satisfaction. Like, watching it gave you the same level of satisfaction. I kind of cut you off at one point. Do you have anything?
Oh, I was just gonna say that like the combination of them inside Gluttony is struggling to get out, and then when May was gonna take them across the desert back to Xing, and then they were like, oh no, you're gonna like leave everyone behind, and like just like manipulating her into taking them back to father. I was like, oh, they're gonna make May think they're on her side, and then actually they will end up on her side. I was like, oh, I'm so ready for this, and then that didn't happen, and I was like, oh, goddamn, I totally misremembered that. I personally think it kind of makes their death more tragic. Like, Greed's death is tragic in the way that like he had to say goodbye to everyone that he ended up actually like forging connections with, but I feel like Envy's death is tragic in the way that like they never reached a peace.
But would they ever have been able to?
That's true.
I don't know. I wish they would have leaned a little bit more into the seven deadly sins aspect of it and what their sin is, just because I feel like, I mean, I guess that would be a risk of being a little bit too cliche, but I feel like there was, it just felt almost a little bit half-assed. Like, gluttony, he wants to eat everything, that's really clear, but like lust, she was definitely an image of perceived lust. Like, she dressed provocatively, her voice sounded very alluring, and you know, she looked gorgeous, but she didn't really ever act lustful. It seemed more like she would have been a vessel to enact lust in others. And like I said, envy, we got the whole end speech when they were dying, but there wasn't really any point that their envy seriously impacted their ability to do their job. Like, greed kind of did, because that was part of the reason that he was able to forge these human connections and want to leave father, was his greed for knowing more, for being his own person, for etc. whatever. He's like, you can't tie me down because I'm greed. But then envy's was just kind of there. Lust was just kind of there. I mean, I guess sloth was physically slow, but also he was really fast.
Yeah, he could be fast when he wanted to be, but he didn't like doing anything.
I guess.
Such a pain. Dying's a pain. Living's a pain. And I always liked his lines. He was funny.
I don't really like Bradley being Wrath. Was just kind of like, he never really seemed angry. He just seemed content.
He was angry towards like the end, like when he could be Wrath instead of being Bradley. I think the one that makes the least sense is Pride.
Yeah.
Because he's just is.
I think maybe he had like a lot of pride in father and in being a homunculus.
Rather than like pride and like dignity and like one's sense of self.
Yeah, which I don't know if I'm just pulling that out of my ass or if that's how it's actually supposed to be interpreted. But he definitely, like, I feel like there were moments where they were trying to make him face like the reality and be like, this isn't good for you either. And it was almost like he's like, but father said it's like you're almost too prideful to like admit that not following father could be more beneficial to you. Again, I don't know if that's a stretch or not, but that's my thought.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I just don't get, like, I guess you could say that I see what you're saying when you're saying that, like, Bradley was a little more angry in the end, or I guess, you know, a little more wrathful at the end, but
I mean, he took out an entire like area of soldiers, like, by himself.
But it didn't really, like, it never, I guess when I think about them, I think about like your motivations, and like he never seemed to act out of anger, you know what I mean? He always felt calculated, and when I think of wrath, I don't think of being calculated.
Yeah, more just like blinded by rage kind
right
of thing.
And even at the end when he's quote unquote angry or wrathful, like he's being attacked and people are trying to kill him. Like, I feel like any reasonable person would be upset in that situation, and that's not really a great indication of wrath. I actually think that Bradley's is, I don't know, I still think Lust's is the weakest connection, but she was around for such a short amount of time. I think out of the homunculi we saw for a longer period of time, Bradley's is the most disconnected, or envy.
I still go for Pride.
I don't know, I like my justification I've managed to pull together
for
why Pride is prideful.
I think you're good. Yeah, that's a good argument. Yeah, I think wrath comes through, like, especially in the beginning kind of scenes when we don't know he's Wrath, and like you kind of just get the hints that he's like this is a dangerous guy, but then he's like smiley and he like kind of charms you back onto his side, and you're like, oh well, like he's a Fuhrer, like he's an important, dangerous man. Maybe that's something
more to pick up on your second watch through, because I can't particularly say that I noticed any of that.
Yeah, like there's like a scene in the beginning when they're in there like in a hospital room, and he comes around and everybody's like, oh my gosh, and he's like kind of says something vaguely threatening, and everybody's like kind of shits their pants, and then he's like,
it's just not wrath to me.
Yeah, I just feel like it's like wrath on like simmering underneath, like the threat of what might come. I see your arguments though.
I don't know, I don't think Bradley was very wrathful. You know who was wrathful?
Mustang.
No. Although probably you could make that argument.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Kimberly.
Oh, absolutely, too, Kimberly. Yep.
Yeah. What was Kimberly's whole thing at the end, he had like a major character moment. What was it?
Oh, he was, because pride consumed him to like kind of heal himself. Right. And then he basically, I forget exactly how it happened, but he kind of caused pride's demise by like destroying him from the inside out kind of thing.
That was very strange, and I don't understand fully how that was able to happen, but I was kind of here for it. I was just like, yeah, Kimberly seems like the kind of guy that's like, oh, once you cross this line, fuck you.
Yeah, if I'm going down, you're going down with me.
Yeah, it was something to do with him being like, you're right, because it was like, you're a homunculus, you're not weak, or you're weak, or you're like, it was like a moment of,
I don't remember. All I remember is pride being like, how are you still an individual soul among this mass of souls inside of me? And Kimberly being like,
well, yeah, but it was motivated by like pride. He was doing something that like Kimberly was seeing as weak, right? Like he was.
I don't remember. Nothing really surprised me, but I did misremember that thing about envy. But what I was really trying to pay attention to was the world building and the magic system, because I remember being really confused at the end after I had watched it. And so I was like, cool, we're rewatching it from the beginning. I'm going to really pay attention to the world building and the magic system and the alchemy and all the explanations and everything, and hopefully I won't be confused at the end. And I was still confused.
Yeah. So, what were you confused by?
It's like hard to put into words, because I feel like when I explain it, it sounds like it makes sense, but when I'm watching the show at the end with the giant, like what Father was trying to do in like getting the powers of God, but he didn't want to rule the world, he just wanted to like have knowledge, and then the like godlike being in the in-between space, and like,
yeah, it's a little bit wishy-washy. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, it's just confusing. And like, I couldn't tell at the end of my first watch. I couldn't tell if it was just that I was misunderstanding, or if it was like, it kind of fell apart at the end.
Right, if there's like deficits in the writing.
Yeah, and so that's what I was really hoping to figure out on like an actual full rewatch. And I still can't tell.
No, I think it's just not very well. I don't think they developed any specifics for their magic system or their world building in terms of again, magic isn't quite the word that I want to use, but basically the magic of the world, the alchemy of the world, and whatnot. And so I think that it makes, it just makes everything a little bit like if sometimes it feels like they're trying to justify things with aspects of their world that they never fully fleshed out or never addressed before, and it seems a little bit like it's like, what is happening because of that?
Yeah, like the loopholes that are like, oh, you didn't consider this angle. It's like, well, wait, what sets up that loophole to exist, and why isn't what's happening? And yeah,
there were definitely times, and I wish I could think of specifics, but now it's been like a couple weeks since we finished it. It's been a little while. Yeah, it's been, I think, like 3 weeks since we finished it, and so I don't have any specifics lined up for it. Maybe I should have been taking notes while we watched it. So.
So it gets a little too big, I think, at the very end, which is sad, because I think the scope of it is really interesting. Like the realization that the whole country has been founded to be a giant transmutation circle, and like everything has been working towards this thing, and like all of that, I think that's really cool, and it really like I don't know, like shook me to the core, like when that first like came about. When I first watched it, it was like, holy shit, this is way bigger than anyone thought it was going to be, and like this has been happening for centuries, since the foundation of the country, and like the reason for every major political event has been because of this, and like hot damn. And so I think that's really cool, but then it gets like so big and so kind of convoluted with what Father and the homunculi are trying to do that I just get confused.
Yeah, and also their rules or stances or whatever on human transmutation just is so blurred and not clear, and I think that's really a pity when so much of the conflict and struggle in this story, when that is something that is centered around.
It's revealed that the homunculi and like kind of the people in power made human transmutation taboo as part of their plan. And so it's not like been a thing that's been part of alchemy forever. It was like a manufactured, like, oh, this is taboo, you can't do it.
I don't even remember that being a
Yeah, it was like brought up, and
they manufactured it being taboo.
Like manufactured the idea. Like they put the seed into society that this was like a super taboo thing.
When did they even explore that? I don't even remember that happening.
It was, I don't remember when in the show, but it was kind of when the whole foundation of the country, I think, was being explored, and that was being revealed. But it was weird because it was like they did that, to my understanding, they did that to tempt people into doing it. I think they said it was like taboo, and they tried to make it seem like it could happen, like you can actually bring someone back to back from the dead, back to life from the dead. But it's like super taboo. You shouldn't do it. You can't play God like that, in order to tempt people into doing it and then being eligible for human sacrifice.
I literally don't remember any of that, so
but
I guess I just missed a huge chunk of the story right there.
So they like wanted to create the human sacrifices by tempting them into human transmutation, by making them think it was possible, and then the revelation is that like it just isn't actually possible. And so that's kind of the human transmutation kind of taboo and how that started.
So you disagree with me again, essentially, right?
About the lines of human transmutation being blurred?
Well, you think they're blurred for plot. You think they're intentionally blurred for plot purposes, right?
I think that the lines of human transmutation are blurred. I think the plot aids that. I think it is just also blurred because of the writing, because like we get when we're first introduced to human transmutation, it's like bringing someone back from the dead. Mm-hmm. But then like when they're inside of Envy, Ed is like, oh, I'm gonna perform the taboo again, and he like performs human transmutation, but just transmutes them, like basically teleports them out of Gluttony's body, and they called that human transmutation.
I totally forgot about that, and that is another thing that totally did not make sense to me.
Yeah, and so it's like instead of bringing a soul back from the dead and putting it in a body, they're just taking their own souls and their own bodies and moving from one place to another, and somehow that's like okay.
Yeah, well, my original example for this was going to be at the end when they hurt Hawkeye and were just trying to get Colonel Mustang to perform human transmutation in order to save her life.
Yeah.
Which confused me because I didn't really see how that was different from like the healing spells that, and they have blurred lines between alchemy and alchemy, which I don't blame them for, because I think that was intentional. Like alchemy is kind of the same, or they work on similar principles as alchemy, but they're not exactly the same, or da-da-da-da. And so I think that was intentionally blurry, and that's not a criticism. But part of alchemy was that May could heal. Like, she specialized in healing. So I don't really understand, if Mustang had the capabilities to heal Hawkeye, why that would essentially condemn his soul or make him eligible to be a sacrifice. Because why wouldn't May also be in that boat?
Yeah, like at what point does transmuting parts of your body make it human transmutation?
Right. Or when is that a condemnable offense, essentially?
Yeah, when does it make it the taboo?
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like the argument is that like the taboo would be like once you have to see the truth, because it's like the people who see the truth are eligible for the sacrifice. But then why is just like healing? Is it because she was too badly injured? I don't know. Why didn't they just kill her and try to get him to bring her back to life?
Yeah, rather than just have her on the
it edge. Just seemed very like, again, like not well defined in an unsatisfying way.
Yeah, not undefined and like, wow, this is a big concept and I don't fully understand it, but I'm behind it. But undefined and like, this doesn't really make any sense to me, like based on the evidence that we've seen before. And also them making Mustang perform human transmutation, I don't really understand how that worked. They were like, oh, we're gonna make you do it, and like it like harmed them. Like that's kind of like one of the things that kind of pushed Pride towards being defeated, is that, and they kind of touched on it, they were like, oh, there's a reason that they wanted us to do it ourselves and they didn't want to like force us to do it, otherwise they would have done it this whole time. And it's like, oh, well, it must like hurt them, and we did see Pride like kind of like literally falling apart. But I still don't understand what that was. Like they did magic stuff and then Mustang was in the portal of truth, but Hawkeye was still injured.
Another thing that I missed completely, honestly. You're saying this and I'm like, wow, I did not pick up on this at all.
yeah, it was like a whole thing. They were like, if they could just force us to do human transmutation and become sacrifices, like why wouldn't they have done that already? Like why make it a taboo, make people think it's possible to bring people back from the dead?
I literally don't remember. When did they talk about this?
It was like in their fight down.
I guess I just was not. I was not picking up on the subtext or overt text.
It was overt text. It's fine. There's, again, benefits of rewatching is I get to pay more attention to the world building and stuff, which is again what I was like trying to accomplish with the rewatch.
I was just gonna say, this is kind of a pivot, but my biggest, I think, gripe and like, how do I say this? My biggest, like, this is unsatisfying to me and I hate it about the show is the very end, Mustang using the what's left over of the Philosopher's Stone to heal his blindness. Like, I get that there was an implication that Mustang being blind is unjust because he didn't choose to do the alchemy, the human transmutation to get him in that situation. And so I understand how narratively him being able to regain his eyesight is theoretically just. However, when you take into consideration that these that the
Philosopher's Stone,
the Philosopher's Stone was made from the complete annihilation of the Ishvalan people and the genocide of their people, taking the result of that genocide and then using it to restore the eyesight of the new leader of the country that did the genocide just feels not right.
Yeah, and not only the new leader of the country that did the genocide, but one of the main proponents of that genocide.
Right.
Like, he's called the hero of Ishval.
Right.
Like,
so, like, I get that on, like, a micro level. Mustang should have, like, he, as a person, deserves to have his eyesight because he did not make the decision that resulted, with full consent, he did not make the decision that resulted in him losing it. But on a macro level, or even on the micro level of looking at that Philosopher's Stone, that should be put to good use, like given back to the Ishvalan people, used to restore. And I feel like they kind of tried to play that angle because they're like, it's important for Mustang to be able to see in order for him to help the Ishvalan people. And I'm like, man, does that feel like the colonial savior here to like bring good after doing a bunch of bad, and also slightly ableist.
yeah.
Like a little bit like he can't be the leader he needs to be if he's blind.
Yeah, for a show that features disabled characters like really well, yeah, it is a surprising kind of like, oh, he can't lead the country blind as well as he could if he could see.
Yeah,
like,
and honestly, I feel like if there's anyone that it wouldn't be that much of a hindrance to be blind, it would be like the leader of a country, because so many of the decisions you're making are like analytical based on like information you're taking in or reports you're hearing or people like you have to like. I don't really think it's necessary for him to have to see. Like it's very, that is my least favorite aspect of the show, because I feel like it was a moment where the show wanted you to get on board with this action. They're like, this is the right thing to do. And I think it was like the one time that I disagreed with the message of the show. I feel like usually I aligned with what the narrative of the show was trying to make me believe. So like I was really opposed to the military control in the beginning, and eventually like the narrative of the show is like, yeah, that military control is wrong. And like, so all of the things that were happening, like if I had a bad feeling about something that was happening, usually the show was trying to say, yes, like you should have this bad feeling. But I very felt at the end they were like, this is the right thing to be doing with this Philosopher's Stone, and I'm like, it's really not.
Yeah, and then just also that he first uses it on Havoc. He's like, oh, but first there's someone who deserves it more, and he uses it on Havoc to get the use of Havoc's legs back. It just, yeah, and it also, I just feel like it's a weird thing for Dr. Marco to do, because he's the one that gave the stone, and he was like, oh, like you're gonna like save the Ishvalan people, and like Marco feels bad because he's the one who like discovered the formula for the Philosopher's Stone, so everything is literally all his fault, because he went through this whole guilt thing with Scar, and he was like, you should kill me because I'm the reason for like the extermination of your people, like I'm at fault, like you need to take your vengeance out on me. And so I feel like it should have gone to Scar or like one of the leaders of Ishval. Like it's like, I just feel like that would have made more sense for where Marco's character ended up with his like trying to like earn redemption from Scar. Yeah, so I just feel like it's weird for him to take it to Mustang.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also like Mustang was leading the like kind of rebuild of Ishval and stuff, but he also wasn't the leader at the time. Like General Grumman was Fuhrer. Right, well, that's the
other thing is they kind of had this whole thing where they're like, the people who did the war crimes have to eventually face the repercussions of that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, yeah, that includes us. And right now we're working towards like setting up the democratic system and getting everything in order in our own country. And then once we get everything in order, we are going to hold ourselves accountable to that. And then I feel like they lost that.
Mm-hmm.
Like there wasn't anything implying that they were going to at least not be in leadership,
Mm-hmm.
but like go to jail or literally go and help Ishbal.
Yeah, community service.
Yeah, it's essentially community service. Like, but yeah, so I don't know. It was kind of weird because they almost implied like, yeah, we do need to, you know, pay, essentially face the consequences of our war crimes, and then they kind of skipped over that in the end. That part in particular was a little dissatisfying.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I did really enjoy the show. Yeah.
That's good.
We've spent like maybe the past half hour or so kind of ragging on it.
Critiquing bits.
Right. But overall, I think it was really well done. And it was an engaging story. And I think usually the messaging in it was good. Yeah, I overall liked it. I don't think it would break my top 10 anime.
That was going to be my next question.
I haven't slotted it in actually yet into my list.
What would you rate it out of 10 though?
My instinct is a 7.
Okay.
It's a little bit harder for me to just pull a 1. Okay. So this is going to be a little bit of a sidetrack for how I rate things, but whatever. So usually I prefer to rate things on a scale of 5 because I think it's more simple and clear cut, because you have a 3, which is middle of the road, good, solid, whatever. And then you have 2 levels above that and 2 levels below. So you have a 4, which would be above average, and a 5, which is essentially perfect or like near perfect. And then you have a 2, which is slightly below average, and a 1, which is terrible. And I like that simplicity. And I feel like when you start with a scale of 1 to 10, it can get like the differences between a 6 or a 7 or 7 or 8. It's just too much like, well, what do I take into consideration to put it in these little things? So when I'm just asked to like rate, so I started with, I guess what I'll say is I started with a scale of 5.
Okay.
And then once I added enough anime into my like 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s, I started to see a delineation in each category. And almost every single category I felt like I could split into 2. Like I have my, like, of my 4s, I have like a good half which I liked better than the rest of my 4s. And so that's when I split my list into a 1 through 10 rating system.
Okay.
So now I feel like I use a lot of the other anime around it more to gauge where I think it would be. So I have a less form, because right now I would say on a scale of 1 to 5, it's a 4. Like, I think it's a solid above average show. I don't think it's a 5. I don't think it's stellar or amazing, which 4 would roughly, I think, equate maybe to 7 or 6 or something. I don't, again, so now it's like, since I have all the anime ranked, it's more like, oh, where should I put it in this like ranking? Like, where do I feel? And so my instinct is like a 7. Because I think that's
float around there.
Yeah, it would float around a 7 because I think that's where I have Bleach. And I feel like I feel similarly towards what am I trying to say? As I feel towards Bleach in terms of like, Bleach is always a really interesting grounding factor for me because I absolutely despise a lot of Bleach, but I absolutely love a lot of it, right? So like in terms of consistency, plot, characterizations, I think Full Metal Alchemist has everything nailed down 10 times better. But in terms of the way it like pulls me and makes me feel towards like the characters, Bleach ranks higher for me. And so Bleach is like my test. Like, what am I trying to say? Like, Bleach is a 7 despite a lot of other things. So when I like think of media, sometimes I compare it. I'm like, would this, even though Bleach is subpar media, I feel so strongly positive about it. Does it trump that, or does it succumb to the fact that it's like better media, or are my emotions about Bleach still like superior to it? So I feel like with everything between the two shows, they like equal out. So I feel like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood would be about a 7, and I think I have ranked Bleach as a 7.
Wow, I'm personally offended that you have Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood ranked the same as Bleach.
Well, kind of in my head. I mean, in my top 10, Full Metal Alchemist doesn't break that, and Bleach was...
Yeah.
I think Bleach was number 7 in my top 10, which is separate to the score I'm talking about giving it a 7.
Yeah.
It's a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, but also I think it was number 7 in my top 10. I don't really remember.
Still personally offended.
Are you surprised though?
No, just because you're so emotionally tied to Bleach, and I know that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood doesn't quite have that pull of the characters for you.
Yeah, I really like Reed. I really like Ling. And who's my fucking third favorite?
Scar.
Oh yeah. But see, like that's a steep drop off by the time you get to my third favorite. Which it really shouldn't be. I should remember Scar better because he was my like first fave.
Yeah.
I guess that transitioned into our favorite characters.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you what your top 3 favorite characters were.
Definitely Ling is number 1. And Greed ended up making it in there, and I think Greed is solidly at my level 2, my number 2, not level 2. And then Scar would come in at 3.
Fascinating.
Yeah, Scar dipped a little bit. I know we
Yeah.
talked about it in the end of one of our episodes, but he got a lot on the religiousness for me, for my personal taste. Not because I have anything against religion, just because it's an aspect that I don't really connect to. But then he like really brought it back at the end. I really thought that Scar was going to die. I'm really glad that he didn't. But I 100% was expecting that, and I was like, I kind of get it, not because I personally think he deserves to die, but because him as a character had a lot of guilt that he was obviously struggling with in terms of how he responded to whatever the Ishvalan situation. And so I think they could have used death to symbolically like release him of that guilt. I'm glad that that's not the route they went down, because I think that would have had some greater implications for whether his anger was justified, which I think it is. Like his entire like nation got massacred. But I could see them easily going down that route, and so I'm glad they didn't. But I really thought he was gonna die for a second. Like I was like, yeah, they're killing him off. I was very upset about Greed's death, though. Oh my god, they like, and especially because they pull such a 180 on you, because they really like built, like, it is a moment of Greed and Ling connecting, being like, yeah, we're gonna do this together and like go forward and da da da, and then Greed just like, lol, JK, I'm sacrificing myself for everyone, and it is heart-wrenching. Oh my gosh,
you were freaking out.
I was freaking out. I was upset. He's just an amazing character. I really ended up liking
good
Greed.
Character.
Like,
yeah.
I could tell early on, I was like, he has the potential to be my favorite character, but he wasn't quite there yet, but he solidly got there.
I think it's funny the difference in your favorite characters, because halfway through your ranking was Scar, Ling, Envy, and so I like that.
I think Ling
was on there.
Ling was on there.
Yeah.
No, I think he took number 1.
Oh, was he number 1 pretty quickly? All right, yeah. But
I think it was Ling and then Scar and then Envy.
I just find it funny that Ling and Scar are still in there, and then you just switched one homunculi out.
Well, yeah, at that point when I had said that, it was still, I was thinking Envy might get a redemption arc.
Yeah, because I think at that point they had just like kind of teamed up inside of Gluttony,
yes,
and so it was
exactly.
like, ooh.
And not that I necessarily think that the redemption arc, because of being a redemption arc, would have endeared me to Envy more, but I just think that if Envy had gotten a redemption arc, we just would have seen more of them, and that would have been what it is. But as it is, getting out of Gluttony was one of the big times that we got to know Envy as a character, and then after that they played a much smaller role in the show, and it was just harder to keep my passion for them as a character alive.
Yeah,
it ended up switching over to Greed, but yes, that was a really, really well done death in terms of its emotional impact and its 180 that it pulled. Oh my god.
It was so just heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's, you know, I can appreciate that they committed to deaths happening though, of characters. I don't usually like to consume a lot of media necessarily. I don't know. I have things that I say about myself and my personal consumption of media that, like, I'm worried that if I state as an absolute rule, there will be too many exceptions, I guess, for it to be a rule. And so, like, but generally I don't like character death and major character death. But I think what I dislike more is it's unrealistic that everyone got out of this unscathed. And so I appreciate that they really did commit to having some major players die, including the dad. What was his name? Hughes. And having his death be like kind of a motivational note, I guess, a motivational note throughout the show. And I'm really sad about, I guess something else that I'm sad about, this isn't a death thing, I was just thinking of Hughes dying reminded me of Winry, which reminded me of the other mechanic girl.
Panina.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I really thought she was going to be a much more major character than she was, and I was really excited. I thought she seemed really awesome, and then once we left that town, really didn't see anything of her.
We got like one more hint of her.
Yeah.
And then she wasn't around anymore,
Yeah,
which is really sad. She's super cool.
Yeah,
and
she
like
seems awesome. I honestly thought she was going to end up being one of my favorites, but then we just literally never see her again.
She's really severely underutilized. I think like one of the greatest things I think there is about Full Metal Alchemist is that there aren't any like, there's really like next to no throwaway moments or characters or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything ties together in a really nice way. Even like everything in Lior in the beginning with Rose and stuff like feels like, okay, cool, like this was just a tool to get us introduced to like the idea of Philosopher's Stones and like kind of what's happening, but then that comes back and it's like, oh, this shit that happened in the beginning was one of those like blood circle like things that like forms
that
the
was a really nice
circle
connection.
And then like they end up going back to Lior and we meet Rose again and stuff like that. And so like, and like you said with like Hughes's death being like a really major event that continues to like fuel the characters like motivations throughout the entire rest of the show, all of that like it all ties together, it all leads into each other, and all of that I think is really, really strong. But then we get like Panina. She was so cool, she was such a strong character, but she really didn't have any impact on the plot other than like she led them.
Did you watched Full Metal Alchemist?
No, only Brotherhood.
Only
Brotherhood. I didn't
Brotherhood.
watch the one-off, the one season.
And you haven't read the manga, right?
Correct.
I heard from one other podcast that I listened to, Anime Out of Context, on the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood episode that they did. One of the guys was saying that there was a little less character exploration done in Brotherhood because they didn't want to rehash a lot of stuff that was already depicted in Full Metal Alchemist.
Oh.
So part of me wonders if maybe she had a bigger role, or maybe there's more nuance to it, or whatever in the original anime series or in the manga that we just didn't get in this one because they cut back a little bit on character exploration.
Interesting.
So what about you? What are your top 3 characters?
So my top 3 characters, it's like hard for me to decide because I feel fairly equally about everyone.
Ooh,
like,
question.
Yes.
Do you feel like you have the same favorite characters as the first time you watched it?
I don't know because I never really thought too much about favorite characters until we started being together.
Okay. Call out post.
Just because like sometimes like I'd be like, oh yeah, like I love this character, like, oh, they must be my favorite character in like some shows, but like I just never really thought about it. I never really put a name to it until, I don't know, we started interacting, and that was like a facet for you to get to know people, and this is something that you enjoy knowing about people as their favorites. And so like I had watched Supernatural before I knew you, and I had never really thought about who my favorite character was, but then I just kind of ended up realizing that it was Castiel, and then you were like, your favorite character is Cass, and I was like, is it? And then I was like, oh yeah, it totally is. And so that's something that I know now, but it wasn't something, and it was something that was present throughout me watching the show. I always looked forward to Cass, and
my favorite character was Cass before they trashed his character.
Okay, well, we're not getting into this. But yeah, and so I don't think I knew who my favorite was when I first watched it, or it's just not something that I thought about.
Right. That's why I asked, do you feel like your favorite is the same? Like, do you feel like you feel relatively the same about characters as you did the first time, or do you feel like you have a difference of opinion now?
No, I think I feel pretty much the same, and I think it is the fact that I just really love all of the characters. Like sometimes with shows there's like super standout characters and I'm like, oh my god, I would die for this character, and I just really, really like everyone in this show, and so I've nailed down like favorites, but I just like every time anybody is on screen, I'm just happy about it. Like I was excited for every time Alex Armstrong was on screen because I think he's funny. I love Izumi Curtis because she's a badass. I loved when Panini got introduced. I always looked forward to when Winry came back into the plot. Al is a darling. I was super excited for General Armstrong's introduction and all of her moments. And then like the Briggs guys are all super cool as well. And I love Mustang's team. And like I just really like all of the characters. Like all of them made me happy to see them every time. And so it made it really difficult for me to narrow down favorites. Okay, so number 1 for me, I think, is Al. Just because he's such a bean, and I just love him and how I just think he's so funny. Like, he's such a funny character.
So it's so funny that you say that Al is your favorite.
Yeah.
Because I've been thinking, and this is low-key something that we'll explore in a future episode, but I've been thinking about your type of favorite character. And I was like, she kind of has like a third type of favorite character. And then I was like, I need to like start figuring out the spread of this. And is this equal? Is this not? Like, what am I? Because we've been watching Bakuten recently. And your favorite character so far is the main character. Bean. And I was like, all right, so now I have 3 types of favorites, but you can't just keep adding. I say you, but I don't mean you specifically. Like, I guess will refer to myself as it because I'm the one that's trying to categorize your favorites. But I can't just every time you have a new favorite character, it will be like, oh, well, they're this category, because then I'm just going to end up with a bunch of categories. But I feel like 3 is solid, and then I'll have those 3 characters, and we're going to go through your favorite characters for different types of shows and categorize them into which category they are. So right now I have Bean, Himbo adjacent, and of course the Stoic with a heart of gold. Those are the 3 archetypes of favorite characters that you have. So I've just been developing this in the back of my head. I actually wasn't planning on telling you. I was gonna catch you a little bit off guard.
Okay.
But here we are. And I'm telling you just because Bakuten was the first time I was like, maybe it's like a Bean. Like, she has Bean as one of her favorite characters. And then you said Al was your favorite here. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm right. I'm starting to narrow it down. This is what I want. I want to be able to predict who your favorite character is in media accurately. Because right now I feel like I have no fucking clue. If we start a show, I'm just like, I don't know. But slowly, I'm revising it to narrow it down. So anyway, Al is your favorite because he is Bean and baby.
Yes. I just think he's so funny. I love his, like, spirit and how I think his and Ed's relationship in this show is so well written. I think it's one of the best portrayals of a sibling dynamic. I just think he's great. Like, all of the times when he like yells back at Ed and Ed is like, oh damn, or like when he's just trying to be helpful and sweet but he's like in this giant suit of armor, and how earnest he is, and I think the strength that he gains throughout the show and all of that, I think it's just really great and I adore him. And then my second favorite character, I've landed on Hawkeye, just because I think she's so cool. Like, I think she just brings such a good stability, and I think she's a really great foil to Mustang as well, or not necessarily a foil but just a counterpart to him. I think she's just really cool, and I think she gets to show a lot of sides of her, of like her being sensitive to things and being understanding, and kind of like that shown with her like kind of relationship with Winry, but then also how like cold-hearted and like kind of calculating she can be as well. And then for number 3, so in the beginning when we were watching the show, I had Winry in my top 3, just because I always looked forward to when she was coming back. Like, anytime they were like, okay, Winry, like, bye, we'll see you in a little while, I was always like, Winry, come back. When is Winry gonna be back in the narrative?
I wish I liked Winry more than I did.
You surprisingly really don't like Winry.
No. I wouldn't say that I don't like her. I just, she had moments where I wanted, in The Incredibles, when Edna Mode is like slapping him and he's like, get yourself together.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I wanted to do to Winry sometimes. And not that I necessarily want to fault any character, but especially a character of a young person for being like emotionally distraught in moments that would cause anyone like great amounts of distress. But like, holy shit, sometimes I just felt myself feeling like she was just unnecessarily weak. And I was just annoyed by it. Like, I just felt like, I don't know, maybe it wasn't consistent with her like her previous depictions of her characters or what. But yeah, I just wanted to be like, Winry, get yourself, pull it together. Like, just pull your shit together. Because I also feel like it was a little bit of a disservice sometimes, because again, I want to be clear that like, I don't think that strong characters can't have moments of vulnerability or where they break down or anything like that. But I just felt like Winry's moments like that happened to the detriment of the team, where no one else's moments happened. Does that make sense? Like, there were like I wish we hadn't waited 3 weeks for this, or I wish I had written down these moments in the moment where I was watching them so that I had the concrete examples. But I felt like her moments of distraught were happening at inconvenient times that were having an impact on whatever was happening, whatever function or fight or scene. It was like, you need to not be doing this right now. And I felt like that didn't happen with anyone else. And so I feel like sometimes I felt towards her the same way that I feel towards Sakura in Naruto, which is like, I don't like you and you're being really annoying right now. And I think it's like bad writing almost, because no one else has these moments. So it's only that character that's dragging down the team, and that makes it annoying. It's never someone else having an emotional breakdown when that's happening, even though that would be realistic. It would be realistic for other people to be having these issues. Realistically speaking, it's realistic for Winry to be having these moments, but since no other character has these moments, it just feels like it's annoying because it's only her. And that's the same thing I think with Sakura and Naruto, is like, she has these moments where it's like, get yourself together. And it's not necessarily because a character under that type of pressure shouldn't be having these breakdowns, but because no other character seems to have those same issues, it just feels annoying. Does that make sense? I hope I'm phrasing myself correctly. I just don't want me to say like I'm annoyed by her sometimes and have it come across that I don't want to see multifaceted characters or strong characters, or that I don't think that strong characters, especially when we're talking about women representation, it's not that I don't want to see them vulnerable, but when it's only them and they are actively inconveniencing the team, it's just stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do feel like Winry gets relegated, especially towards the end. I think she gets relegated a little bit too much into the kind of damsel in distress type of role, which is really unfortunate because she is a really strong character and she has like a lot of skills, and she's absolutely instrumental to the success of like the whole like show because of like her role as Ed's mechanic, but also just kind of like her role as kind of like the heart and like home of the team. Like they get a lot of inspiration and strength just from like her believing in them.
And I will say that my feelings towards Winry, or my negative feelings towards Winry, I should say, didn't really start happening until kind of the later end of it. So that totally lines up with what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's just because like at the end, like there's just not much for her to do anymore because like they can't be with her because she'll be in danger, and if she's not with them, then she's not being their mechanic, and then it's kind of like, well, what is she gonna do? And so it's kind of unfortunate. Like I like that scene where she almost shoots Scar and then she doesn't, and Ed has like the whole like, your hands aren't meant to destroy, your hands are meant to create and to help. I really like that, and I think that was a really like cool character moment for Winry, and like and a kind of a point for the show. But also I do wish that she had some sort of self-defense like skill set or knowledge or something, so that she wasn't just rely on everyone else to kind of help her. And so I don't think it's like a flaw about her. Like I think it's totally reasonable for her to just be a mechanic. I personally know nothing about like fighting, and if I had only grown up just being a mejanic and not expecting to get thrown into a civil war, like absolutely makes sense that she doesn't have any of this skill set. I just feel I just feel like it's a little bit unfortunate that she just kind of gets like stuck into the damsel in distress, like or just like kind of like I don't know, like the army wife type of like she's just waiting at home.
I don't even know, because I again it's kind of similar, although again to a lesser degree, when we talked about Orihime in Bleach, and we just got so annoyed with her by the end. But in the beginning, like Orihime was one of my favorite characters, and I really liked her. And in the beginning, she's not even taking an active role in the fighting or the battle. Like she doesn't even have powers at the beginning. But then it's almost like when she got powers and then was never able to use them really effectively besides healing sometimes, and she just literally became this damsel in distress, and that's all she was doing, and it was like, you're so annoying now. And I don't know what necessarily is the remedy to that, because again, I don't want to say that just like women can never be a damsel in distress or can never be rescued or whatever, because that's not what I'm trying to say. I think I just don't have the knowledge to articulate my feelings correctly, but it's just this same pattern of them falling towards the one-dimensional, which I want to clarify, like, Winry absolutely is not a one-dimensional character, and for 90 or 80% of the show, she's written really well and multifaceted and has her own goals and whatever, her own motivations. But yeah, towards the end, I just wanted to be like, overcome this with a little more haste.
Yeah, and it's just unfortunate because, like, she is one of the few, like, non-fighter characters.
Right.
And when the entire last season is a battle, there's just not much for her to do. And so she's literally at home just kind of hoping that everything will turn out okay, which is fine, again. But she is definitely a more favorable character in the beginning just because she has more impact because of who her character is. So yeah,
but I don't even want to necessarily say that, like, this argument is going to fall a little bit flat because I don't have examples, because I don't remember media after I consume it. But I don't feel like I was ever annoyed at her just sitting at home not doing anything. I feel like if they were to just have kept her off screen and been like, this is what Winry's doing, it's like,
which they do towards the end.
Right. I'm just saying that, like, I don't ever remember being, like, annoyed by that. There were, like, just literally moments where she would be crying or, like, acting stupid about a situation. Like, it's like a read the room type moment where I'm like, how are you not, like, picking up on this or this or this? That those are the moments that frustrated me. And I don't think sitting out of the fighting is something that annoyed me. I don't expect her to be in the middle of the fighting, and I don't think that just keeping her out of that is a bad thing.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that. I think what I'm trying to say is just, like, she really isn't part of the 5th part too much. Like, when it's the final battle and the day of the solstice or whatever, they really don't show her too much, and I think that just causes her to fade from memory as well when you're, like, thinking about final of your favorite characters and stuff, and at the end, like, we're, like, exposed to the other characters so much more than Winry in the final act of, like, the show, and so I think that also kind of caused her to fade from my favorite characters as well. But anyway, so Winry was originally in my top 3, but I think, I don't know, my 3rd is, like, so hard to nail down because, again, I love so many of the characters, but I think I'm gonna have to give it to General Armstrong. Because she's
interesting,
just so cool, and I looked forward to her introduction to the show, like, so much.
Yeah.
And then I just think she's such a well-written character, and, like, I just really enjoy her. I don't know.
Well, because when you were looking forward to that so much and you were so about her, that I thought she was one of your, like, I mean, I guess I knew she was one of your favorites in the general sense, but I thought she was, like, top 3 material, and then you were so like, no, she's not in my top 3 for a while, and so hearing that it's back in, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's surprising, but also kind of not, like, it makes sense with where I thought you would be on her.
Do you feel justified?
I do a little bit.
Yeah, she's such a badass, and, like, she's so strong, and, like, she's so smart, like, too. Like, she plays all of her cards so well throughout the entire show.
Yeah, she's another character that really, like, knows where her morals are and lives in alignment with them, which is, I like characters who are like that, and that kind of goes for my respect with, like, Kimberly in the same vein. Obviously, I don't like Kimberly, but I like the character of Kimberly because I can appreciate it when, like, a character has a set of morals and their actions align with that. And I feel like with General Armstrong, she's just a clear example of that, just in a completely different direction than Kimberly.
Yeah, absolutely different direction than Kimberly. Yeah, just the way that she's, like, I don't know, she's, like, kind of always referred to as the lady general. Oh, you're the woman general. Like, and they find a woman, they're like, oh, you must be General Armstrong, because they, like, apparently don't know of another woman general in this army. And so just, like, the strength that it took for her to get to that spot, and the culture of absolute respect that she's developed in Briggs, and the way that strength carries through her team even when she's not there. Like, she's still, like, such a viable presence in the Briggs army even when she's not there. Like, they're constantly like, this is what our general would do, we're gonna fight for our general, we're gonna make her proud. And, like, I think that's super cool to see, like, her leadership portrayed so strongly, and just her, like, sense of character in, like, who she is super strong as well. Yeah, I just think she's awesome.
I love that in the dub, and I don't really have any deep insight into this, I just want to mention it. I love that in the dub they called her Sir. I don't know why. Again, I don't have really anything more to say on that. I just liked that.
I don't think ma'am came up in the dub at all.
No, I don't think so either. I think they always called her sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something fun that I like that the dub did. We watched this in dub, and I actually really like the dub.
Olivier Mira Armstrong.
I'm almost surprised that Teacher isn't up there as well.
I was thinking about Teacher too, just because like she's really a pretty minor character in the grand scheme of things, but she's so funny. And like just her whole I'm just a housewife after she absolutely fucking decimates people, or like the whole thing about how she trained on Briggs Mountain. And
yeah, another thing that kind of came and tied in that like was mentioned a little bit offhand but actually had a bigger tie-in. Another example of that.
Yeah, and then they were like, oh yeah, I heard that there was like some bear, and then they're like, oh shit, that was our teacher, like and then how she kind of comes back to like help the Briggs army and all of that.
Yeah, but also that moment where they're like, the woman's back or whatever, where when she was out there up north. Yeah, and she had a fun story too.
Yeah, and I just love her and her husband. Like they're so cute together, but also she's also cute with General Armstrong.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm not super attached to shipping with this show. There are some shows where I get, or some media, because it extends beyond shows as well, but for the purposes of this, there are some shows where I really enjoy shipping characters outside of the realm of whether or not they're going to become canon, but I just enjoy that aspect, and I think it's fun to ponder or think about relationships that potentially could happen. And then there are some shows which I enjoy independently of that, and this is definitely a show that I don't really ship characters, and when the quote-unquote ships that I do have, I don't enjoy them in the same way that I enjoy like high Q ships, we'll say. But I did want to have a section on shipping regardless, because I just thought that it would tie into kind of the themes of our podcasts or our history of like podcast topics that we've talked about so far, and who we are as people. So yes, I love that you brought up General Armstrong and Teacher, because they had vibes at the end, and
vibes.
Additionally, Teacher's husband, I don't remember anyone's name.
I don't remember his name.
Cool.
But their last name is Curtis, so Mr. Curtis.
Teacher's husband and the male Armstrong also had vibes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think that Teacher and her husband just have some, like, you know,
they each have an Armstrong.
They each have an Armstrong that they can go and see for for, you know, some additional fun times and come back to. But yeah, they were totally a vibe at the end.
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah, it's like the Curtises kind of crash through, and then the Armstrongs are there, and they're like, the women are just so like, you're strong and we're respecting of each other's strength, and like, wow, best buddies instantly. And then also like kind of the same vibe with, I really don't want to remember his first name, but just look it up. It's gonna drive me crazy. I want to say it starts with an S. Sig. I was right. It does start with an S. Sig Curtis. Yeah. So Sig and Alex Armstrong, they were also like, oh, you're super strong, I'm super strong, like, and every time they looked at each other, they sparkled. Like, it was cute. Like, I just really liked that these two pairs just like kind of crashed into each other, and then we're like, all right, best buds, here we go, let's conquer the world.
They were a fun little like foursome, not like that,
yeah,
just group of four to be traversing some of
the ship that we're looking at is a U.
Yeah.
A square that's not complete.
Yeah, we don't, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying. Yeah, we don't connect the Armstrongs together.
Yes. It's just each of the Curtises get an Armstrong in this thruple.
Yeah.
Four-ruple. I don't know.
Sure, I don't. But yeah, so are there any other ships that I'm not gonna lie, I am not really about Ed and Winry.
Yeah.
Even though, and it has nothing to do with my feelings about Winry that we just discussed. I just felt like it felt a little forced at the moments where it was there, and I just didn't feel like it was necessary or particularly enjoyable.
I really liked it. I really, really liked it when I first watched it. I still do really like it, but I see what you're saying. Like, they're just not together enough for enough significant periods of time for the development of the feelings to feel natural.
Yeah.
Like, it just kind of is like, oh, they're kind of around each other and like they fluster each other a little bit just because like they're awkward, kind of like teenagers. And then all of a sudden Winry's like, wait a second, have I been falling in love with him this whole time?
His shoulders are broad.
His shoulders
it
are
felt
so
like
broad.
It came out of nowhere. Like that one observation that they made when she was like, his shoulders or something. And I was just like, where the is this coming from? And the thing is, like, I don't even necessarily think that it's unrealistic that those two characters would have feelings for each other or even end up together long term. I just feel like this wasn't the type of plot or type of story that lent itself to have enough time to dedicate to that and to make it feel natural or naturally integrated. It felt underdeveloped, but I don't think it would have helped the story to focus on it and develop it more. So I just think it should have not happened.
I don't think it I hesitate to say I don't think it should have happened. I do think it just feels a little tropey. Like, oh, the guy gets the girl, like childhood best friends, they eventually get feelings for each other kind of thing. Like, I feel like it relies more on the societal expectation that they're gonna get together rather than like actually developing the relationship. Does that make sense?
I guess, but so what's your solution to that then?
I don't really have a solution, but I do really like them.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're cute.
I just think the solution is to cut it.
Oh, no. But, I do have a little tidbit about this, though, so their, like, confession at the train, like, Ed's like, I'll give you half of my life if you give me half of yours. And then Winry's like, I'll just give you my whole life. And then they have this whole, like, embarrassment, blushy sequence. We were on the couch a while, like, before we were still watching the show, and it was, like, somewhere in part 4 or something. We weren't near the end. And I was just watching TikToks over your shoulder, and there was a sound where they used the Spanish version of this show, and they had the subtitles, and it was this scene. It was, I'll give you half of my life, etc., etc. And I recognized the subtitles from the show, and I was like, oh shit, this is spoilers. And I remember, like, the caption of the video was like, oh, I couldn't find, like, the English version or something, and you laughed at that. You were like, oh, haha, they're using...
you said that, and that just triggered that in me. I was like, oh, I kind of remember that. Like,
yeah, it was like a funny moment, like, oh, they couldn't find an English version of whatever show this is, so they are using the Spanish dub with English subtitles. And I almost freaked out and said spoilers and took it away from... I almost was like, she can't see this. But then I was like, because the TikTok itself didn't have anything to do with Full Metal Alchemist. And so I had to restrain myself and be like, if you point out that this is a potential spoiler for something, then it's going to actually become a spoiler. Where if you don't say anything right now, it's going to fade from her memory.
Absolutely what happened. It faded from my memory. I didn't even know what you were talking about until you mentioned the caption, and then I remember laughing at a caption that was like that, but I don't even remember the TikTok it went to.
Yeah, but it was that scene, and it was the Ed and Winry confession scene.
Funny.
And so technically you had seen it already because heard the Spanish version of it. And I remember watching it and being like, is she gonna recognize the dialogue? But you didn't.
No, absolutely not. No, I don't know. I just feel the same way. Kind of like, so my best friend and I, we were both really big fans of Harry Potter growing up. Something we used to joke about was just like the most unrealistic aspect of Harry Potter is just that like no hookups were happening. We got like a little bit of a glimpse into it with like Ginny dating, was it Seamus? Dean. Ginny dating Dean and Harry being jealous about that. And Harry had, like, one crush on Cho and then on Ginny. But, like, realistically, think back to your high school self. How many crushes did you have? How many, like, friends that dated people or didn't? Like, regardless of, like, you as an individual or not. But overall, there's a lot of, like, dating and weird puberty stuff happening all the time. It's constant. Like, who people like, have crushes on, are in a relationship with, have broken up with, that is a huge aspect to adolescence. And it's not really focused on in Harry Potter at all, right? We only get like those couple glimpses with Harry, a little bit with Hermione and Ron. So we used to joke that is just an unrealistic aspect of Harry Potter, that like none of this is going on. There's no sex happening in Hogwarts when you have dormitories that
and hormonal teenagers.
Yeah, exactly. But it wouldn't lend itself to the story to have that happening or to focus on it, because the focus of the story just isn't there, and it just would feel out of place. And honestly, like, who cares about what a bunch of teenagers are doing?
Yeah.
And that's what I guess I mean in the same context of Full Metal Alchemist, is that it would totally make sense for Winry and Ed to have feelings for each other, to have those awkward moments. But narratively, I just don't feel like focusing on it or including it made sense. And I just feel like because we don't have the time to develop that, the moments that we saw felt forced. And that's where I'm coming from, where I just think they should have cut the whole thing, because I just feel like having those forced moments is worse than just taking it out completely.
I find it hard to agree because I do really like it so much, but I do see where you're coming from. I feel like there should be some way for them to do it well. Like maybe just not, like maybe sprinkle it in more rather than having those like, oh, his shoulders, and then, oh, I've been falling for him. Just make it more like subtle and kind of spread it out more. Because, like, Winry has this, like, realization in, I think, like, part 2 of the show. And so if they just spread that out more and had her, like, kind of realizing how much she cares about Ed in, like, a different way than she cares about Al, and, like, I feel like that maybe would have been better rather than the kind of, like...
Sure, if you want to focus more of your story on it. I just think that in order to make it feel natural, you would have to pivot some of the focus.
Yeah.
Which, if that's what you want... is what you want, but me personally, I would just cut it instead.
Makes me curious to see the original anime, what you had just said about pulling back on character exploration.
That is interesting.
I do want to read the manga to give it one last shot at me understanding the world
the
building,
magic system,
because that at least I can digest. I can like easily like pause and digest, whereas if you're watching a show, like you're kind of just taking it in as it's happening. Whereas when you're reading something, you can be like, you can just stay on the page that you're looking at,
or flip back really easily for reference, or
so interesting. Well, we'll see about that, but
you should definitely read it and give me your opinions.
Cool, I will.
Because I'm not gonna read it.
Noted. But I think a couple that does get a good amount of development is Hawkeye and Mustang.
I totally agree. In fact, I wish they had... See, that is an example of a couple that I wish had a little more development, because I just really would have liked to see them together at the end.
Yeah, like they
did such a good job. And I guess that this is like a good contrast, and maybe will make me eat my words on thinking that Winry and Ed needed more time versus just more well-developed time. But I feel like with Hawkeye and
Hawkeye and Mustang.
Fuck me. Because Riza is Hawkeye.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Hawkeye and Mustang, their tension and relationship development was done so well, and they were given relatively the same, I would say, screen time or development in terms of actual time as Winry and Ed for that, but it just felt so much more natural, and their relationship escalation felt correct. And I was like really into it. Like I just wanted to kiss. Like I just wanted to kiss at the end. Like just smooch.
Yeah.
We didn't see it.
But yeah, I think just like because like we're introduced like, okay, she's his lieutenant. Like she's clearly very trusted, and then like we just get more and more of that relationship and more of like her trust, and we're kind of like, I don't know, I feel like we don't fully like Mustang in the beginning, like we're not supposed to, but we see...
I still don't fully like Mustang until towards the end.
He's our favorite war criminal. It's like the joke that I see people make all the time. But we like Riza more than we like Roy in the beginning. And so seeing her dedication to him and hearing her reasons why she stands by him and all of that, I think really lends itself to their relationship and the development of that. And then we get like their whole like backstory with him being trained by her father, and like kind of how they reunited during the Ishval War, and like their absolute dedication to each other, and how, I don't know, I think they just rolled off of each other really well, and like they were clearly super significant to each other.
I wonder if part of why it's so much easier to naturally integrate their relationship or potential relationship into the story versus Ed and Winry. I wonder how much time I'm going to save just by cutting out the pauses that it takes me to recollect names. But I wonder if part of the reason that relationship feels more naturally integrated than Ed and Winry's is because of their age. And theoretically, Ed and Winry would be grappling with a lot of new or newer types of feelings or young love, or there's more embarrassment about that, or more of a I don't realize what I'm feeling type of feeling. Whereas Hawkeye and Mustang being adults, and one already sharing a really intimate history, not romantically intimate, but just
emotionally
impactful, and gone through like similar, very serious and traumatizing events together. So already having that background, and then just being adults and more emotionally mature in general, makes it easier to like, I guess, mesh their feelings together, because there's nothing like superficial that they have to get out of the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other ships for you?
I kind of want to throw some fanon ships at you to see how you think about them. People ship Winry and Panina together.
Yeah, honestly, like I really thought that that's where like I thought that I was gonna ship it, but then we got no development for Panina. But I really vibed them for like the 2 seconds that Panina was on screen. Like I just don't give a shit about Panina, but I vibe that I vibe the idea of that ship, and I thought I was going to vibe it more. I thought I was gonna vibe it emotionally as well as intellectually, but right now it's only intellectual.
Yeah. And then there's Ed and Ling.
I know Ed is like old, but he acts like such a child. That like it's just too childlike for me.
Yeah. And then
Ling, I feel like, I don't know if this is accurate or not, Ling acts older to me. How much older than Ed is Ling supposed to be?
I don't know.
I don't know, which is a weird thing to say, because Ling in a lot of respects acts a little immature. But I don't know if I can put my finger on it, but like he still feels older than Ed. And maybe it's because Ed's storyline is like so wrapped up in him and his mistakes and what he made as a child, where Ling's is very wrapped up in I'm trying to become a leader of something. I mean, maybe it's that simple discrepancy, but yeah, I don't know, I just think I don't vibe that, because it just, yeah, I don't like that one.
All right. And then I think it's actually canon, like in the future. I'm not entirely sure, but Al and May.
Yeah, I like that. Again, May feels like she's written younger than she actually is. Like, I think I looked up her age, or you said she was supposed to, hold on, I'm gonna feel like a fucking idiot. M-A-E?
M-A-Y.
M-A-Y. She's 13 at the end of the series. And so it says 10 to 11, 13 at the end of the series. And even at the end of the series, she does not feel like a 13-year-old to me. Like, she feels, I was going to peg her at 9, which, to be fair, is not that far off from 10, quote unquote, 10 to 11 at the beginning of the series. But then she doesn't really feel like she matures that. Like, the difference between 9 and 13 is what? The difference between 4th grade and an 8th grader? She feels like a 4th grader the entire time. So that's like the part that like gives me a little bit of pause, is I feel like I don't feel it for the in canon moment, but I'm down with it for the future.
Cool. Let me see. I think people will ship Mustang and Hughes together.
Who's Hughes?
The dad who died.
Oh, I don't really give a shit, because Hughes died early on, and so it's like whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not mad at it, but like I would never read a fic for that.
Okay. Yeah. It's usually like fuck buddies during the war type thing.
Yeah, I just don't care. I also feel like I just don't really care about Mustang. Like, I really liked him in Hawkeye because of their canon stuff, but I don't like Mustang enough to care about shipping him with people that he doesn't have any canon chemistry with. Like, in order to ship, for me, this is all me, in order to ship people that don't like meet on screen, or I mean, they've met, but that don't share significant screen time or share significant emotional moments that we see. Obviously they have, because they've been in the war together, right? But like, they're not played out to the extent as Hawkeye, right? I need to like the characters. And I guess I'll like compare Hawkeye and Winry really quick, because I talked about being annoyed with Hawkeye. I mean, not Hawkeye. I talked about being annoyed. What am I saying? Did I just say I'm going to compare Hawkeye and Winry?
Yeah.
I'm going to compare Mustang and Winry for a second, because I talked about being annoyed with Winry significantly towards the end and finding her character annoying. That being said, like, there's like two aspects to it. Like, her character as like a person, I think I would like her in real life. She is a good person, and I like that about her, but I found the characterization towards the end annoying. Mustang, I think, is a really well done character, and they hit all the notes that they need to hit for his character. I like his character, but I don't like who he is as a person. So when I'm like, I don't give a shit about him as a character, it's like, I think he is a flawed person, which makes him interesting, but like flawed in to an extent that I'm just like, I'm not gonna like pair you with people because I'm in love with you, because I just fucking hate you. Hate is a strong word, but you know, you catch my drift.
Okay, all right. And then I only have one more, which is Ling and Lanfan.
That's fine. I again, I probably wouldn't read any fic for them, but it's cute. I see where it comes from. She's obviously doe-eyed over him, and he very, very much cares about her.
I figured you would want to talk about
the best ship in the world is Greed Ling. Oh my god, I don't even know if that's gonna be usable. I got very passionate very quickly about Greedling. Part of it is just when you have two favorite characters, shipping them together is obviously great. My mind just jumped to my top 3 for Haikyuu, and I was like, wow, Tendo and Kenma, or Tendo and Tanaka would be a lot. but you know, usually just two good characters, throw them together, that's a good relationship right there. But I just loved, especially towards the end. So I don't know, at first it was like kind of when they were like starting to get along in the body, and it was obvious that it wasn't just like this push and pull for power over the vessel, but there was actually communication happening, where I was like, yeah, I kind of vibe this. And then, oh my god, at the very end, the whole like speech that Greed gave about everything, and Ling wanting him to stay, and I know that part of that had to do with his immortality and his quest for immortality, and he wanted to be able to remain immortal, but still, the way that they were talking to each other about like coexisting in this human body, I was just like, oh my god, they're truly in love, and I love that for them. So that's like the one ship that I would actually say that I'm like truly passionate about. Mustang and Hawkeye are like a decently close second, but I very, very much like the former better.
They're really good. And especially like one of the things that you kept like, I don't know, shouting at the television was because Greed's whole thing was like, I want to rule the world, I'm Greed. And you were like, cool, yeah, you're in the body of like a future emperor, like do that first, go take over Xing, and then use that to take over the world. Like you kept being like, dude, you have a starting block like right there.
Yeah, literally, like why not go back, rule a country, and then use that country to take over the world, instead of trying to fight this like ground up battle in the middle of a mistress.
Yeah, but just like the moment when like Greed was kind of like settling for that almost in his conversation with Ling, he was like, oh, so like this country, huh, like oh, like I guess we can do that together, like we can rule together, like
I'm so emotional.
And just, yeah, it really is like his whole ending and goodbye and like leaving Ling's body so that Ling can live. And
oh my gosh, he like totally sacrificed himself for Ling.
Yeah, and he like, I think,
and the good of humanity,
he, like,
but whatever,
thanked Ling. He was like, thank you for giving me everything I needed.
Overwhelmed by the vibes between them.
And that's another reason why his death hit you so hard, is just like kind of like their relationship and how that played out at the end.
Absolutely. It was a combination of their relationship, of Greed's character development because of that, and then the 180 that the show managed to pull. Like I fully recognize that part of the reason that was so emotionally impactful was because like their conversation leading up to that was so like essentially getting the viewer hyped for them to work together to fight this thing and be successful at that. And then Greed was just like, I'm dying, I'm sacrificing myself.
Yeah, and it kind of did two 180s, because it seemed like Greed was down for the count and you're like, oh shit, he's gonna die,
right?
But then it's like, oh wait, they're coming back,
right?
But then he sacrificed himself. So it gets you for a triple gut punch right there.
Yeah. The one line, like super cheesy, but about how he's like never truly gonna be gone because he'll live on and like the soul and the memories or something like that. Oh my gosh. Also, what a great jumping off point for a fic.
There's lots of fics out there where Greed is magically back and he magically has his own body.
They're all shit though. I'm not gonna include that in there. I'm gonna cut that. But they're all shit. I think maybe the marking for how into a ship I am is if I get any ideas for writing a fic for them, and I have greatling ideas. Not that I think I will ever write, because I think despite the fact that I have ideas for it, I'm more passionate about other projects that are also going to take 10 years to write. So, but I have the ideas, and that's what's important.
That is important. Yeah.
As a marker, I mean.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's always a marker of how into the show you are based on the fan and content that you consume for it. Because, like, I don't always... Like, after I finish a show, I'll, like, peek into the fan fiction sometimes, not always, just to see what it's like. And sometimes I'll read some. Sometimes I'll get really into reading, but then I won't get into writing. But if I get into writing it, I'm deep in it.
Yeah, the Marvel is the only fandom that I can think of where I'm really, like, that rule is completely broken for me, because I was so into Marvel and consumed none of the fan fiction. I did not really participate in shipping at all. I don't know what happened with that.
Weird.
But I was like so into Marvel, and like I just really didn't ship and didn't consume fanfic. I tried to get into some fan fiction because I was like, I vibe with Capsicle, like I vibe with Science Bros, and I was like, man, if I just like start reading it. And I did, and I read a couple fics, and I just couldn't get into it. I don't know why.
Weird.
I think I just was like so into the story that was being told in the universe that I don't know. I don't really care about fan fiction that isn't centered around ships. Shipping is the type of content in fan fiction that I like to consume. And so I think the fact that I wasn't really shipping people in Avengers, in Marvel, just led me to not be interested in fan fiction.
Yeah.
But for literally almost every other fandom, I completely agree with you that being into that type of media and into wanting to write or create in that respect is definitely a sign that you are like in the fandom. So yeah, any final thoughts or topics that we haven't really touched on for Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood?
I just really like Ed's character development and kind of where he starts and where he ends. Because where he starts is he and his brother want their mom back, and then they don't get their mom back, and so now they want their bodies back. And so that's kind of like their driving goal in the beginning, and like eventually it becomes like, we actually need to save the world, but hopefully along the way we'll still get our bodies back. And then it just ends up becoming like he doesn't get his full body back. He gets his arm back because of Al's sacrifice, but in the end of the show, he still doesn't have his like original leg. He still has the metal leg, and in fact he gives up his alchemy for his brother. And so I feel like him learning to appreciate what he has rather than like focusing on what he lost in like his mother, the fact that he gave up his alchemy, which was so important to him and was such like a key part of his identity, I just think is a really good character
I do really like him kind of having to sacrifice that in order to get Al back.
Yeah, and that's what I really like about the ending too, is like people had to make sacrifices. And I think that's another reason why the Mustang sight thing feels a little off color as well, is because like it just feels a little too like, oh, everything ends up okay. Whereas like Ed's storyline is like, yeah, he didn't achieve everything that he wanted, but he has like he has everything he needs. And so like it didn't end up perfectly for him, but it ended up being perfect anyway. Whereas like the Mustang sight thing is like he gets his sight back and he gets to lead the country, so he gets everything he wants without any sort of sacrifice in that. And
he
so
is like one of the characters that deserves it the least. I'm sorry, but like he's a war criminal.
I think I just am really satisfied by the ending of it, even if I don't fully understand it all. I'm really happy with it. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think I talked my thoughts out throughout the thing.
Nice. Articulated everything.
Yeah, I overall tend to agree with you. I guess we really mostly disagree on the Winry Ed situation. So yeah, I think overall it's a solid show. You know what? I'm gonna put it in my list right now.
Oh my goodness.
Let's see.
So you think it's a solid show, but you're not in alignment with what I feel like is the general opinion that it's one of the greatest of all time.
No, I don't think it's one of the greatest of all time, because I don't necessarily think it does anything revolutionary enough to earn that title. But also, again, this kind of goes back to like Bleach as an example of like a show that I recognize has a lot of bad things that I don't like in it, but that I feel very emotionally tied to. But as a larger trend, I just think that I personally tend to enjoy shows that wouldn't necessarily earn the title of greatest show ever, because I don't need, let me put it this way instead. Even if I did think that it was, I guess I'll use the word revolutionary again, even if I did think it was revolutionary enough to earn that title, I don't think that it would necessarily score a 10 for me, because that's not what I personally look for in shows when I seek them out. Does that make sense? Oh my god, Bleach is an 8 for me, not a 7.
Ooh, that's too high.
But see, I'm gonna put it as a 7, and if anyone is curious, it's ranking below or on High School Host Club for me, and above Toradora.
All right. Still below Bleach.
Yeah.
That hurts me physically.
Really?
Yeah.
Bleach is just so good.
No.
Bleach's characters are just so good.
Yes.
See, I think you like the characters of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood a lot more than I do.
I do, yes. But I also just think that, like, the plot and, like, how well told the story is outweighs the job of the characters in Bleach for me.
That's totally fair. And also, like I said, the way you talk about the characters in Full Metal Alchemist reminds me of how I feel about, like, the characters in Haikyuu.
Yeah.
Where I, like, just love every single character. I love it when they're on screen. It makes me happy to see them. I just don't feel that way about Full Metal Alchemist, even with the characters that I really like. I feel very solid in my top 3. I like General Armstrong. I don't get, like, happy when I see her on screen. I really like Teacher. I don't get happy when she's on screen. I just don't have that same, like,
Fascinating.
Is it fascinating?
It is fascinating because, like, you're such a character-driven person.
Yeah.
And one of the, like, things that I see, like, when people are like, why you should watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, one of the things they bring up the most is characters.
Yeah.
Like, people are like, the characters are all so strong and so good and you're gonna love the characters. And I really love the characters. And so I just
don't know why I don't connect to the characters on the same level as I do in other forms. Like, Haikyuu and Bleach.
Yeah.
Would be like 2 shows that I like can solidly pull out as, like, I would die for a lot of the characters in it. And, like, My Hero, honestly. Throw that in there too. Like, I really like a lot of the characters in that show. I don't know why.
Really interesting.
I just don't. There's something about them that I just feel the way that I've been explaining about.
Yeah, man, I would love to be able to dissect that, but I don't think I'll ever figure it out. But that's why I'll just say it's fascinating.
Well, with you giving your final thoughts and with me giving my final rating, that brings our podcast to a close. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow us at Twitter and on TikTok at Acid Wash Pod. We have no posts, but hopefully, as of right now, but hopefully there will be more by the time you're listening to this.
I think she said that, 3-4 times now?
Like 4 or 5.
Yeah, okay. Someday soon.
Someday soon. Let's see. 6th, 7th? Yeah, I think I've said that about Twitter like 5 times and about TikTok 4 times. As always, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, preferably Spotify, and as always, fuck Google Podcasts.
Oh my god.
Bye-bye.
Bye.